Bob Herbert's op-ed.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to op-ed.tv. Where to start when the subject is transportation in New York City? Drivers of traditional yellow taxis are struggling against the ferocious challenge from Uber, Lyft, and other app-based services. With more and more cars on the street, congestion, especially in Manhattan, is often unbearable. Is congestion pricing becoming inevitable? And what about the subways and buses? Service is often terrible, but how do you raise the billions of dollars necessary to make it first rate? I'll talk about these issues with a man who has deep experience in the day-to-day realities of big city transportation. He's Matthew Daus, a lawyer and former New York City Taxi and Limousine Commissioner, a former president of the International Association of Transportation Regulators, and now the technology chair of the Transportation Research Center here at CUNY. That's a mouthful.
It is.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Good to be here, Bob.
So we've had, in the past several months, at least 6 suicides of yellow cab drivers. And in most of those cases, if not all, the stated reason has been the difficulty they've had making ends meet, making a living. Is it that much harder now to make a living as a cab driver than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago?
There's no question about it. And even as an Uber driver, I mean, some of these unfortunate instances involved Uber drivers as well. There's just so many vehicles out there, so many drivers, and it's expanded to the point where supply is outstripping the demand for the service, I think. And I'm sincerely, and we're all praying and hoping this is the last one we see. There's broader issues, obviously, in society. We've seen Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade. Suicide's never an answer, but 6, that's unprecedented. And I'm sure there are individual circumstances, but this happened. This is not. Suicide is not necessarily something that doesn't happen when there's people who face economic straits. Some people may have other issues, and it forces them over the edge. I mean, when the stock market crashed, people were jumping out of buildings, committing suicide, and the irony and of when this happened. The second person who committed suicide, Doug Shifter, took his life in front of City Hall with a shotgun. That was the same day that basically they had the taxi riots in New York in the 1940s, which led to the creation of the Haas Act, which created the medallion system, where the same situation, or similar, after the Great Depression, not enough business, too many cabs, and that led them to limit the supply, and that became the norm around the country in a lot of big cities for, basically many, many decades. So people are wondering also why we have spent so much time and effort with the Department of Transportation to put bike lanes and curb congestion and mobility management and trying to discourage the use of a car, but we've allowed these companies to grow exponentially in every city, not just New York. So yes, it has a lot to do with supply and demand, and that's really what it all comes down to. It's the economics of it, and economists could debate whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but the situation is not really very good right now.
You mentioned the medallions. A lot of people don't understand the medallion system in New York City. Some drivers own medallions and some do not. I don't know. Is it most do not own the medallions? They lease them, or they work for someone who owns medallions?
That's correct.
But explain the medallion system, and then explain why these medallions, which at one time were incredibly valuable, have plummeted in value.
Sure. First of all, you're absolutely right. And about 60% of the cabs by law have to be corporately owned, and 40% at least must be driven by the owner. That was part of the Haas Act that was passed after the Great Depression. It remained in place. And when we sold 1,000 medallions in the Bloomberg administration, for the most part. They're all back in storage now. When any economist would look at, or any bank, there really was, until Uber came on the scene, no reason to doubt that it would go south the way it did. The reason why it got so high is because when we did the auctions, we spaced them out because we were concerned about there being too many medallions on the street too quickly, that it would hurt the drivers in terms of adding too much supply. So we spaced them out 100 at a time every couple of months or every year or so. And as a result, on the open market, things were so good back in the 2000s and the 90s. After the Giuliani reforms of late 98, there was a driver shortage, but then in the 2000s, there was a big comeback. Mayor Bloomberg was the first mayor to give the drivers a living wage in 2004. And right after that fare increase, we started selling these medallions in sealed bid, highest bid auctions, which means that we would set the floor as the city, usually based upon the last 6 months' market prices. And what would happen as you get closer to the auction on the open market, the prices would start going up. And then we hold the auction and it just shoots up because it's highest bidder. And that became the new normal. And if you look at a chart over the last couple of years when it peaked at over $1 million, when I started it was in the 200,000 range. It's really the auctions and the dynamics about the auctions, and really the fact that we had almost like a bunch of golden years for this industry, which coincided with the Lehman crash, by the way. When the Great Recession happened, cabs benefited because all the black cars lost their business, and we put the credit cards in the cabs. So they picked up a lot of that business. So they had these great days that just coincided with an incredible rise in value from 200, 300,000 to up to $1 million. And then Uber comes onto the market and keeps adding vehicles.
But if most didn't have medallions, that meant most drivers weren't benefiting from that steep increase in the value of the medallions. How was it that Bloomberg was able to establish a living wage for drivers? What did he do?
Well, we did the largest fare increase in city history. We did a 24% fare increase, and for the first time ever, we gave all of that money to the drivers. And the way we do that is you leave the lease rate where it is. You know, there's a law that says that owners can't charge drivers more than a certain amount.
Right.
So everybody benefited. The ones who own their medallions benefited, and the 48,000 plus drivers when I left all did very, very well, even as shift drivers.
But if the point of the medallions was to limit the number of cabs that were on the streets, right?
Correct.
If that's the case, and that's your primary way of regulating the number of taxis, what sense did it make to allow Uber and Lyft and the other app-based services?
Well, I think after I had left...
So, I mean, something's wrong with that equation. Either the medallion system is not a good system because it prevents popular services like Uber and Lyft, or we need to regulate Uber and Lyft or prevent them altogether. You can't have it both ways, right?
There is a way to have it both ways, and I think that's been part of the problem. I mean...
well, we have it both ways now, but people are committing suicide.
Well, I think the part of the problem, too, is that the cab industry got complacent for too long a period of time. Every time they would address an issue, they would take it head on, they would win. They got used to winning, and then they were outgunned by a company that was able to give massive amounts of contributions. In Chicago and in Springfield, Illinois, you know, Uber hired every lobbyist that was out there. I mean, you can't compete with that.
What? Politicians would respond to lobbyists with a lot of money?
Some of them do. Some go over the top, and most do. But look, they were outgunned, and there was too many resources being put in against the cab drivers' leveling of the playing field argument. You know, they have their hands tied, really. The regulations that created the medallion system treated cabs like it was a public utility, meaning they regulate the fares.
Right.
You can't put a sticker on the cab without getting TLC to approve it. The cars, how many times they're inspected. The for-hire industry, which is how Uber entered the market and Lyft, is more loosely regulated because it was designed for services that are like limo services that have a brand name and service people that have more money to pay for the service. That's probably closer to what it costs for a transportation service. You know, what happens and why cabs need to be regulated is because anytime you're dealing with something above the public transit fare, which is heavily subsidized, and, you know, $80 to go to the airport, that price there's such a small profit margin that owners are constantly compelled to try to figure out a way to reduce their costs. And when they went to the independent contractor model, that became the norm, that drivers own the cars, they pay for the gas, and they just basically lease the cabs and like landlords, and they just take their money. And that led to a degradation of service in some ways, because you can't even control the drivers. If you tell them you need to dress better, okay, if there's not a regulation that protects you, you can be sued by the Department of Labor and get class action lawsuits that they're really employees. So the independent contractor model is one of the issues. The regulations, when new technologies like Uber came on the scene, tied the hands of the yellows. And rather than free up those requirements, the cities just didn't do anything. And Uber, in fact, when they passed their state laws that allowed them to be legal with less regulations on background checks and fares and so forth and surge pricing, they specifically put, as part of their lobbying, into the definition of a transportation network company, this shall not include cabs and limos. So that effectively, at a state level, tied them into these local regulations all over the country. And New York is really the only market, I think, that has a chance of surviving on the yellow cab side because it's a hail system. Everywhere else in the world, for the most part, you have to either call or hail. And I think that's going to save the industry because ultimately it's going to shrink. And it'll be confined to the airports and the central business district. But the industry needs to do something dramatic. The smartphones, the industry is so fragmented that they weren't able to pick one smartphone app for the whole country. If they would have done that early on, they would have really been able to compete with Uber. What happened is that the industry is so divided in every city, the fleet owners would pick one app, and their neighborly competition would pick another app. So it's fragmented.
Conceptually, this stuff can be hard to follow, though. So we have the taxi drivers on the one hand, and before we even think about Uber and Lyft and the other app-based services, we're also concerned about congestion. So people are talking about congestion pricing, which I hope we'll get to in a minute or two. You want to limit the number of vehicles that are out there, but at the same time, you're saying, come on Uber, come on Lyft, come on the other app-based services. So you're flooding the streets with additional cars and that sort of thing. And then you're saying, well, wait a minute, we're upset because taxi drivers are having a hard time making a living when we're bringing in all this competition. So what is it that we really want to do? Are we concerned about whether cab drivers can make a living, or are we concerned about too many cars on the streets of the city, especially in Manhattan? Conceptually, what is it we want to achieve?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the essence of regulation always should be, you go back to your mission statement. What's in the TLC city charter? What's the mission? No matter what regulator exists in this industry, it's usually two things: customer service and safety. These other issues, these socioeconomic issues and congestion, that kind of pushes the envelope a little bit. There are other agencies that deal with this, but customer service, we want to make sure that people get good, prompt service that's courteous, and also that the service is safe. That's what the TLC's role is. So, raising fines for being discourteous, putting the credit cards in the cabs, all these things that were done tried to make the service better. I think regulators realized that the service was so prompt with Uber and with Lyft that they just let it go because this was taking the heat off of them. Because the regulators and the commissioners that are responsible for these services, even though they're not their employees, they get all the heat politically. So it was an easy thing for London and New York to say, okay, let these guys go and let them pick people up. And then sooner or later caught up with them. When they got too big, the yellows really started to suffer. They didn't really suffer dramatically at first. There was a real gradual decline in services.
But where are our priorities? Are we more concerned about trying to stabilize the living standards of drivers and even medallion owners, although a lot of them are wealthy, but let's say drivers, or do we want to take more vehicles off the road? Because it seems to me that they fight one another. If you start taking a lot of vehicles off the road, you're just going to put the drivers out of business. So the idea of worrying about whether they can make a living or not becomes moot. So as a city, which do we want? Which are we more concerned with?
Well, that's a good question. The city as a whole, things have changed. Streets are at a premium, okay? The street space and how you configure things. Things have become more congested, not just because of Uber and taxis, but because of freight and other things that are happening. I think that it really comes down to philosophy. Do you take the Adam Smith approach, or do you take the regulatory approach, the progressive regulation, where you
Right.
want to get involved in the weeds. I think the answer, like anything else, is somewhere in between. But I do believe that when it comes to city planning now, we don't have an option. Things have to be looked at holistically. We have to look at the city as a whole and all the different modes of transportation together. There's been too much siloing going on for the last 30, 40 years. Taxis were always considered a private service that had nothing to do with mass transit. Some cities around the country, like Seattle and now LA, they're looking at doing studies to plan out everything together, which would include how many cars we have on the road. When we did studies of the TLC, we're only looking at for-hire vehicles. We weren't looking at freight. We weren't looking at other sustainable modes like bike sharing and ride sharing. We should have, in my opinion, taken that $500 million or so a year that's going to come from this, I call it an MTA tax. It's not congestion pricing. January 1st.
I was going to get to that. Explain that. January 1st, basically, your taxi fares in Manhattan are going to go way up.
We're going to get a 17% increase, which I'm very concerned about in terms of...
That's everything below 96th Street in Manhattan?
Yes.
Is there any place else in the city?
No, that's it.
Okay.
And it's going to be, I think, ferociously enforced, I'm sure. And, I'm just concerned that none of that money is going to these type of things. We should be taking a portion of that money to look at the L train shutdown.
How's that? But who is that supposed to help, though? How is that going to help the driver? If you have to pay an extra $2.50, because there's for yellow cab drivers, if I have it correct, there's a $2.50 surcharge that every passenger is going to have to pay for every taxi ride below 96th Street. Okay, so if you've got even a $6 or $7 taxi ride now, it's going to cost you $8.50 or $9.50. I'm going to tell you, as a longtime New Yorker, people are going to stop taking those cabs. So who is it supposed to help?
Well, if Uber decides they want to subsidize the rides and cut the fares, which they can afford to do because of their hundreds of millions of dollars in private equity investments, this has been their business model. They'll give thousands of dollars in signing bonuses for drivers to join them, and they can actually pay the drivers and even reduce fares for the passengers. And it's almost like dumping. It's like manufacturing a car in another country and then selling it in the U.S. for below cost to take over the market. If they were to do that, they would put a lot of livery bases and black car bases and taxi cabs out of business. And I think the concern I have about this policy, it's not congestion pricing, Bob. It's an MTA tax, which is looking to...
It's not congestion pricing, I agree.
It's far from it. So there's two things. Number one, is that a good policy? And number two, if it happens, what's going to happen to the industry and what is going to happen with Uber? I think.
But what's it designed to do?
It's designed to raise money for the MTA.
What do the architects, right, which goes to your point about
They're saying it's going to solve congestion, Bob, but
right.
It's not.
It's a tax.
Everyone is going to show up for work on January 1st.
Yeah.
Taxis live, and people are still going to take them, and they're going to realize quickly that Uber is cheaper. They're cutting their fares. I guarantee you they will do that.
New Yorkers don't know this is coming. January 1st is going to be a shock to a lot of people. Your Uber ride, your taxi ride is going to cost you a lot more dough.
That's right.
And we'll see what happens. But what about congestion pricing? Are you in favor of it?
I think if it's done correctly, I'm in favor of it. I don't think this is the correct approach. I'll tell you why. Number one, it's going to create more congestion in the short term. I think the way that
congestion pricing will create more congestion?
This plan, it will.
It will. You're scaring me now.
Well, this isn't congestion pricing.
No, this isn't. No, I'm talking about real congestion pricing.
Well, if it's...
Are you in favor of that? In other words,
yes, I am.
You have to pay money to come into Manhattan, say, below 96th Street.
I think if it's done with the right exemptions for people who need to get to hospitals and sharing and of incentives that would allow motor vehicles to come in. I mean, the whole point is you still want people who are willing to pay the premium to come into the city, and you need to make traffic work. So I think that's a good policy, but doing it first for the for-hire industry is a bad policy, because in the short term, I think the public is going to realize why it's going to be bad for the congestion pricing movement. People are going to say this is making congestion worse in the short term. The goal of the MTA and the state legislature when they did this was to basically force the industry to shrink and for the subway system to get better, in theory, over a long period of time. People will migrate and kill this industry and go on mass transit. Now, there are some people that believe that's the right thing to do. I think it's a backwards way of doing it. I don't think it should have been done this way because it's going to create more people showing up for work in the midterm, and it's going to cause a lot of pain to the cab drivers. I'm more concerned about people who might commit.
It's definitely going to cause a lot of
the suicides
cab drivers.
Continue into
it is really weird
2019.
To be concerned about suicides on the one hand, and then doing a policy that's going to cause more pain to cab drivers on the other hand. That seems really bizarre to me. But I want to go back to the congestion pricing plan, not this tax, not this MTA tax, as you put it, because I agree with you. This is a tax. This is not congestion pricing. But a real full-blown congestion pricing plan. You would be in favor of that. Why?
Well, I think there are different versions of congestion pricing. You have London, you have Singapore. I'm in favor of the Move New York plan, which is something that Gridlock Sam Schwartz, who used to be Mayor Kutch's.
I know. I used to be at the Daily News. I know Gridlock Sam.
So and he's still there. So he's a very good friend. I helped him. I advised him on some of the initial parts of the plan. I like that plan. You have some tolls go onto places where there have been no tolls, and you reduce them, which is unheard of. I think only once in recent New York City history was there ever a toll that was eliminated. And that was when Mayor Giuliani thanked Staten Island for voting for him by getting rid of the Staten Island ferry toll.
Exactly.
Other than that, it's very rare. I think the mayor who took the tolls off the East River bridges won. I think it was Mayor Gaynor. He won handily in re-election. So it's obviously a political issue. It's been a big football. Bloomberg tried.
But if it's done the proper way.
If it's not the Move New York plan.
What happens? Why are you in favor of it? What's the goal?
The goal is to incentivize, in my view, sharing. I think the Move New York plan with more ride sharing to allow cars to come in and share is a good thing. I think people need cars to get from points to point.
Because you want fewer cars on the road in Lower Manhattan?
I just want people to get as quickly and as cheaply where they need to go. And we don't have a perfect system.
But
we
what
have
makes you
buses.
think that would happen with congestion pricing? Because it'll cost people more to get where they need to go.
Well, I think if it's done in a way where you can have vehicles be required to share to get into the city, and require them to share during rush hour, which is a big thing I've been pushing for.
But you can't require them to share.
You can.
Oh, you mean taxis and?
Yes, everything could be, regulated through this phone. There's a way to limit this thing called surge pricing, which creates a lot of congestion.
But the ultimate goal would be what?
Less cars and more use of mass transit, but more efficient use of all the modes, and having the modes work together, which is something that congestion pricing has not addressed. The congestion pricing in London was like, let's just have people pay, and we can take the money and fund mass transit with it, and we'll get less cars coming in. I think you need a more holistic approach. You need to take that money and not just put it into bridges or MTA infrastructure. It needs to be put into a plan to fund what the FTA is doing now with the Sandbox program, first and last mile. In Coney Island, when you get out of the train, there should be a stand or an app that can take you to your home for a minimal amount of money. One seamless app. It's called Mobility as a Service. That's where the future is, and I would like to see some of this money go into that.
All right, we're going to have to stop there because we're out of time.
Okay.
But I need you to agree to come back because we need to address some of these issues that you're talking about with congestion pricing and also with mass transit, which I know you're proficient in. So if you'll agree to come back, then I can stop
anytime,
Bob. This was great. Thank you so much, Matthew Daus. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. When I first read the report, I found parts of it difficult to believe. But I've had experience covering the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and they have always been reliable. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. According to a national CDC survey, 1 in 10 American high school girls reported that they had been physically forced to have sex, and 1 in 28 boys said the same thing. 31% of American students, nearly a third, said they had persistent feelings of hopelessness, and 17% said they had considered suicide. Nearly 14% had actually developed a suicide plan. These very disturbing findings were contained in the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey of 15,000 high school students across America. The study found that sadness among students was pervasive, and many lived in fear of bullying and violence. In some cases, the fear was intense enough to cause the youngsters to miss school. 1 in 5 students reported being bullied at school. We should not have substantial numbers of American teenagers living in fear or burdened by feelings of hopelessness or considering suicide. These feelings are not only much too high, the CDC survey found that they are increasing, and that should tell all of us that our society has really gone off the rails. This survey should have received much more attention in the press, and our attitude should be not just horror, but a sense that for far too many of our kids, the seeds of catastrophe are already sprouting, and we should respond as we would to any emergency. That's all for now. See you next time.